So the materials that you'll need for today to do weaving is you will need a weaving board, which is made out of cardboard. You'll need the colors of yarn that you want for your weaving, scissors, and then one of the weaving needles. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is pull off a long bit of yarn, and don't cut it off of the roll of yarn yet. And what you're going to do is you're going to get a piece of tape, and you're going to tape the very end of your yarn to the back of your board. And then you're going to flip it over, and you're going to go into the slots, and you want to go right across from each slot. You want to go to the one right across from it. So you should ultimately have an odd number of pieces of yarn, like lines of yarn. So you want an odd number. So you could have 5, you could have 8, or I mean, 8's not odd. 5, 7, 3. And then what you're gonna do is tape the piece of yarn on the back after you cut it. So then you should end up with your board, and it should look like this, where you have straight lines going up and down, and then the two ends are taped on the back. Then what you need to do is you need to get your first color that you want to start weaving, and this time you're actually going to cut the yarn off of the roll. So you want like a couple arm stretches. And then one end you're going to tie to your weaving needle, which is different than a sewing needle. It's longer and plastic. And then the other end you're going to tie to your first piece of string, your first line. So I'm going to go ahead and tie that to my first line of yarn, and then I'm going to start weaving. So there's a pattern for weaving. It's a lot like stitching or sewing, where you go under, over, under, over. Okay, so under, over, and then you're going to pull all the way through. So it's a lot like sewing, because you need to pull all the way until it stops. You don't want to pull so hard that your yarn moves, like your yarn line, that first one, you want it to still stay straight. And then on the way back, you're gonna do the opposite. Okay, so then that way it will start to stay on your lines of yarn, and then you can kind of push it up. So my first one I did over, under, over, under, over, under, over. On the way back, I'm gonna do the opposite. So on the way back, I'm gonna go under first, under, over, under, over, under. And then I'm gonna slowly pull. And I just wanna be careful to push my yarn up as I continue. I'm gonna do this a lot of times. A lot of times. You're basically making rows of yarn. Okay, I'm gonna speed it up. Okay, so I used all of my green yarn, and I wanted to show you how to switch colors. So I'm gonna go ahead and just cut my yarn, and I'm gonna leave a tail there because I'm gonna grab my next color, and I'm gonna pull a couple arm lengths, and I'm gonna cut off however much of the next color that I want. Then I need to just tie those two ends together so that I'm just gonna basically extend that yarn that's already there. And I'm gonna tie the new color end to my weaving needle. So I wanna make sure that knot is tight. I can help with tying if you're not sure how to tie. But the other end of my yarn goes through the weaving needle just like we started. But now when I start weaving again, I'm gonna slowly start the next color of green that I chose. So now I just keep going with my same pattern like I was doing before, except for now my new color is gonna start to show up, and then I can just keep going until I run out of that color or until I wanna switch to a new color. I decided to switch to a cream colored yarn or white to finish it off. So you don't have to go all the way to the end, but whenever you are ready to be done, is you're going to cut the the weaving needle off, and you're going to tie off that end so that it doesn't come unraveled. Now this part's really tricky because you don't want your weaving to come undone. So you're going to flip over the back and you're going to cut your original pieces of yarn and untape the ends. Now this part you got to be really careful because if you pull too hard on the yarn, it'll slide right out of your weaving. Okay, so you got to be really careful. We're going to tie each of the hanging pieces of yarn together so that the weaving part stays on those pieces of yarn. So I did that right away because I didn't want my weaving to fall off of those pieces. So I'm going to tie those. I'm tying the first one to the second one to the third one to the fourth one. There's not really a right or wrong way to tie it. You just want to make sure that your weaving stuff is not going to fall off. That's the biggest point of tying them. So I'm just going to tie all of those ends together. And some people like to cut the ends off. I like the way they look when they hang. I'll show you mine at the end and what they look like. I like the hanging pieces of yarn. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the tape off of the back for the second part, and you can see it is something you got to be really careful with. My weaving kind of started to unravel just a little bit at the top, and so I just fixed it and then started to tie my ends. So you do have to tie both ends to make sure that they're going to stay. And I like to tie them in a knot just to make sure they really stay. So I just did tying like I'm tying my shoes once and then twice. And again, I tied the first one to the second one to the third one to the fourth one, and so on. And there you go. Now they're all tied off. I'm going to show you how to finish it up. So this last step is just giving it something to hang on. I decided I wanted like a natural stick. You could do a popsicle stick. You could do just like, I don't know, a piece of cardboard even. You could have it hang from, but I wanted a real stick because I thought that my colors were kind of natural, like the outdoors, and also that's just kind of what I like artistically. So I went ahead and tied one end of my weaving to the stick, and then I'm gonna let the other ends hang, and then I'm gonna hang it up and see how it looks. So this is my final weaving. You could also potentially tie a stick to the bottom end. I was thinking about that when I was doing mine, that maybe you could tie a stick to the bottom pieces, or you could even add more pieces of yarn to hang, but this is kind of how mine ended up, and I'm pretty happy with it.